Dear students, greetings of the day. I will be talking about undue influence in this session. We have discussed coercion in the last session. Undue influence falls under the section 16 of Indian Contract Act 1872. Undue influence. The word is very clear. In terms of understanding the first word undue, that means there is no due part, there is no obligation, and influence is to be understood from the impact, from the status. We always say that the person is influential because of high status, richness, position and power. So, influence is to be understood from two P's, position and power. Undue influence is when one of the party has a dominating nature. They use their power, their position to work against the will of other party. So if a boss is dominating its employees to do particular task that employee is not supposed to do, it is just because of undue influence. Let's take an example. You are appointed as an accountant in a firm. So your boss calls you one day and says, you have to go to the market and receive the orders from the distributors. So as such, it is not your job to do it, but you are doing it, you are agreeing on it because you know he is at position. So he is your boss. So even if you are appointed to record the transaction or record for business events, but you are agreeing to work as a receiver of orders from the distributors. So there is a distinction of your profile as an accountant and as a marketing person. So it is a clear-cut case of undue influence. Boss is giving you the work because he is misusing his or her power and position. So power and position words are very important. So one of the party is dominating the another party to obtain his or her consent. So in that scenario, consent is not free. So there is a chance that of taking unfair advantage because of dominating position or power on the other party. So the principle behind undue influence is the doctrine of equity. Now what is doctrine of equity? Where everybody is to be treated as equal responsibilities, right work at the right time, with the right scenario, in the right spirit is done. So doctrine of equity purports these 5 rights. Right work at right time, with right resources, in right scenario, and to a right employee. So it is where the effect of undue influence leads to voidability of the contract, because consent is not free, consent is induced by undue influence. So again there is a requirement of a valid proof. Investigation will be conducted and against whom charges are filed up that complainant will be called, parties will be heard, proofs are sorted, evidences are collected, and then the case of undue influence is proven. Let me give you an example, very plain example. For example, Z is a rich landowner and Y is a poor farmer. So, Y has one cow that he wants to sell for rupees 5,000. And since Z is in the authority, he is a rich landowner, he is a member of a panchayat committee, he uses his position, power and offers him just 2,000. And Y does not speak up. Y knew that if he would speak up, then that will be against the interest of his family. His family members will suffer because Z is a rich landowner and a member of a panchayat committee. So he has power, position, status, and he is dominating Y. So Y sells the cow by accepting 2,000 rupees instead of 5,000 rupees. So this is a case of undue influence. So as per section 16, subsection 2, a person is deemed to be in the position of controlling the mind, controlling the will of other parties in 3 scenarios. Number 1, when he holds a real or apparent authority. That means when we talk of relationship between principal and agent, master and servant, income tax officer and assessee, there may be certain cases of domination. So real or apparent authority is when the position is higher. So we have a hierarchy. We do talk of there is a high income group, medium income group, low income group. We do talk of top level management, middle level management, lower level management. So when you are in authority of top level management and influencing middle level management for doing certain things that are not part of their key responsibility areas, KRAs, it is the case of undue influence. When middle level management uses the dominating nature towards lower level management to influence or get the work done which is not part of their job, it is clear case of undue influence. So first point is real or apparent authority. Second, when any person stands in a fiduciary relationship, that is relationship based on trust, love, affection, care towards each other. So that means fiduciary is when we are trusting a person. So like husband and wife relationship is fiduciary. So they trust each other. Or we can say any advocate and client, any doctor and patient relationship, any teacher and student relationship, all these fall under fiduciary relationship. So fiduciary is when the relationship is based on trust, care, faith, affection, love, etc. So if, for example, there is one teacher of business law and he or she gives assignment of marketing management to the students because he has taken up a marketing project somewhere else. So when they are giving this assignment of marketing management to the students, they are impacting and influencing and using their consent under the mechanism of undue influence. So students are doing the assignment of marketing because they know that marks are in the hands of evaluator or the teacher. So you are using free consent and getting the work done of business law, then it is not undue influence. So undue influence is misusing the position, misusing the power and give a psychological force. So there is a mental pressure to perform. So when there is a mental pressure to perform, then that is used as undue influence. So just understand, in the case of fiduciary relationship, consent is not said to be free. So free consent is when it is not induced by undue influence. So we have understood the case of real or apparent authority. Second, we have understood the relationship of fiduciary nature. And third is when a person's mental capacity is temporarily or permanent impaired due to age, due to sickness, due to mental or physical distress, the parties enters into a contract, then in that case it is of undue influence. So if doctor is influencing a patient by knowing this person is now in the age of retiring, or they knew that this disease will be taking the life of a patient, they enter into a contract and using the position, it is a case of undue influence. So in all three scenarios, it will be considered as undue influence. Case of real or apparent authority, case of fiduciary relationship, or case of just mentally disturbed or distressed. In all these cases, when the power and position is misused, it is a case of undue influence. Like I explained it, when any one party is in a fiduciary relationship to the other party, that is relationship of trust, confidence, affection, faith. So they assumes, they believe there is no case of cheating, betrayed, and it will not be gaining to one party and loss to another party. So these are few examples which I have quoted. You could just understand that solicitor and client relationship is fiduciary relationship. Trustee and trust, or spiritual advisor and devotee. So since they are under that consideration, they are learning, or if medical attendant and patient, or a relationship of parent, child, husband, wife, guardian, ward, all these carry a fiduciary relationship. So fiduciary relationships are where they are backed by trust, faith, belief, and parties know there is no betrayal. So let's take an example. Under the undue influence, an elderly man who was ill, who was feeble, was forced to sign a contract to pay an expensive sum to the doctor for his care and treatment. The court will set aside this contract because it is under influence. So what is the need to pay the hefty amount by the elderly man? What is normal fees? If the doctor is charging the normal fees as per the categorically division, it is okay. If doctor is charging hefty amount, expensive way of treating the person, patient, then that case is set aside by the court because it is a case of undue influence. Let us understand what is the difference between coercion and undue influence. Because we have covered coercion, we have understood undue influence, it is very important to understand the difference between these two. Coercion falls under section 15, whereas undue influence falls under section 16 of Indian Contract Act 1872. Coercion is using the threatening force, physical force. So that means person is obtaining the consent with the help of threatenings or warnings. So any kind of contract in terms of kidnapping, child trafficking, honor killing are all falling under coercion. So you are obtaining the assent or consent by using a physical force. Physical force is very important. For undue influence, it is improper use of position and power. So you are influencing a person to enter into a contract by using these two P's, position and power. So undue influence is mental force, whereas coercion is physical force. Let's talk about an example. X is threatening Y with a gun point to enter into a contract with Z. So just like a gun point. So you are agreeing because there is a gun. He will take up your life, right? So those cases are falling under coercion. Whereas for understanding undue influence, there is one policeman who is stopping B who was driving seat belt, and A as a policeman is also a political person. So he managed to get a police job and he is stopping B, right? So charging a challan in all the scenarios where everything is right, who was driving, who was wearing a seat belt, who was under all the, processing all the documents like license, like car documents. He is possessing all those documents. Still, challan was being managed. So challan was imposed by a policeman who is politically influenced. In that scenario, it is undue influence. So any contract who is being entered with the force called coercion is violated at the option of the party. So that means if any contract is obtained, entered by coercion or undue influence, contract is voidable. Now let us understand what is voidable. Voidable is, that is actually at the aggrieved party's option. So if aggrieved parties raises the voice against the incidents, then it is void. If aggrieved party does not raise the issue, does not raise the voice, it is valid. So coercion and undue influence will make the contract voidable. Another distinction is, in coercion there may or may not be any relationship between two parties. That means A and B may be knowing to each other or may not be knowing to each other. So that is something very stranger to the contract or part and parcel of the contract. So if you are kidnapping a child without knowing the background and you have kidnapped, and then you take out the information and say, I need this much amount, then in that case it is parties are not known to each other. So just like when we talk of any person enters into your house by showing you gun and saying everything you have, just give it to us. So you give all the cash, all the jewelry, then in that case it is you are not knowing that person. So coercion may include strangers to enter into the contract because they have used physical force. So jitne bhi, whenever we talk of any theft, any robbery, that party who is doing this robbery may or may not be knowing the person. But under undue influence, there must be relationship between the parties. So relationship is very, very important. That means if I say there is a relationship between boss and servant, yes, only then that boss is able to use his position and power in an inappropriate manner. So undue influence calls for the relationship. You cannot influence or impact other person if you don't know him or her. So coercion is basically between even those parties who may or may not exist. So relationship is not important. But for undue influence, there must be relationship between the parties to the contract. So that means when they are in a real or apparent authority, when they are in a fiduciary relationship, when they are in a obligation to perform, so in those cases, relationship is visible. So if any parent is saying, okay, fine, I'll bring you a laptop once you get 90% marks. This is a case of undue influence. Parent is using it for the betterment of the child. But the case of fiduciary relationship, obtaining the assent and consent to make him or her study is actually undue influence. So undue influence requires a relationship. Last distinction is coercion. There exists use of physical force. So physical force is the first thing that is visible in the eyes of law. So you are using a person's consent by the use of gun, weapon, right? Whereas undue influence, it is mental pressure. It is mental force. So when you are using the moral force to obtain the assent of the party, it is undue influence. So coercion and undue influence are very, very different towards each other. Coercion is use of physical force for making the party ready for the contract, and undue influence is using the mental force for making the party enter into the contract. So in the last, I would like to conclude that when we talk of free consent, we must know what is consent, what is free consent. Consent is you are agreeing on to something but where minds are meeting. So voluntarily you are agreeing. So meeting of minds of the same thing in the same sense with the same interpretation makes it as consent. And in order to make free consent, we require consent plus the incidents not used to obtain consent. That is coercion, undue influence, mistake, misrepresentation, and fraud. So when we are using the free consent, we must know when consent is not free. So we have discussed coercion and undue influence in this session. Coercion is party is using the physical force. Party is actually kidnapping somebody to make, to force, to allow to enter into the contract. So physical force is very, very important. So if you receive a call from any terrorist that you are under their purview, you have to do this. So you are scared and you are doing that. In that case, this is coercion. And undue influence, second incidence, where consent is not treated as free, it is where we have obtained the consent by using mental force. So your boss is giving you pressure to do something that is beyond your KRAs, key responsibility areas. So as an appointment, you are an accountant of the company. So you are performing those roles, and that is normal contract. But simultaneously, they are giving you pressure to obtain the orders, to get the orders from the distributors, to go on a field marketing, to convince. So that is beyond your KRA. So you're doing it under the influence of your boss. So what if you will not do, he will fire you, your salary will be stopped. So in those cases, there is a mental pressure to perform. So constant mental pressure makes the case as undue influence. So constant physical force makes the case coercion. So as such, when we talk of coercion and undue influence, the resultant factor is it is voidable. It is voidable at the option of aggrieved party. If aggrieved party raises the voice against such incidents, then it becomes void. If aggrieved party does not speak up, then these contracts are valid. So it's just like the crimes are happening, but how many crimes are reported by the FIR? How many FIRs are actually converted into charge sheet? That makes the contract as valid or invalid. So if crimes are happening, number of crimes are unreported. So in those cases, unreported crime cases are considered as valid. And those reported cases may be converted into FIR converted into charge sheet, then the proceedings of arrest or warrants, summons happen. So in the last, I would like to conclude that the consent obtained by using coercion and undue influence is making the contract voidable. Thank you so much. Enjoy learning and enjoy reading. Thanks.